The variable with the most potential to impact our training is often so obvious we fail to see it. It's hiding in plain sight, right there out in the open, silently waiting to be found. Sometimes it's more of a concept. An early intermediate lifter whose love for the iron has greatly surpassed his ability to strain looks for the answer to his plateau in every hidden corner of the web, scouring 20-year-old forums for that secret method he can use to finally make more gains, never realizing the solution he needed all along was to simply push himself harder in the gym. Sometimes it has more to do with implementation. The powerlifter turned bodybuilder tries everything in his power to grow his biceps with weighted chin-ups and rows, never quite able to see past his big three heavy compound movement conditioning to realize the truth that if he wants to grow his biceps, he should probably start doing some curls. Sometimes the variable is so laughably there, when you finally see it, you can't help but wonder at all the time you spent unaware of it. It's something like that I'd like to talk about today: heavy sandbag lifting and the grip. To start, I should say that no one grip is necessarily better than any other. Different scenarios call for different tactics, and there's likely to be a scenario to fit every different grip you might think of. That's the key part though, every different grip you might think of. If you never actually think about it, and just kinda wander through on autopilot, it's likely you'll never maximize your grip potential. That's what I did for years. The basic fingers interlocked grip felt natural when I first started lifting heavy odd objects, so I just stuck with it and never really even considered that there might be other alternatives out there better suited for certain lifts at certain times. That was until just about 6 months ago when I had to branch out. See, I've been doing these ultra high rep sets of box squats recently, sets of 200 plus, sometimes lasting a full hour, and with something like that, the fingers interlocked grip becomes unusable after rep 20 or so when the chalk disappears and the hands become sweaty. I was forced to experiment with other methods, and in doing so, I was surprised to find just how much strength I was leaving on the table never branching out, and just how much I stood to gain by leaving my comfort zone. The truth is, if you only ever use a passive grip like the fingers interlocked grip, you will only ever wield passive strength. If you want active strength, you need an active grip, something that forces you to actively work at keeping your hands in place at all times. I'll share my favorite later in the video. For now, let's get on with it. Here are, in my opinion, the 3 best grips you can use for lifting heavy sandbags. The first grip I'd like to cover is the hands apart grip, which simply refers to keeping hold of a sandbag without your hands touching, or at least not overlapping. This grip can be very useful in some scenarios, though it does have one major drawback. Because it puts extra strain on the upper arms when compared with other grip techniques, it can make grip more of a limiting factor, making it tough to push your powerful prime mover muscles to their limit. This is especially true for someone relatively new to sandbags, as the biceps usually take a while to adapt to this training style. With this grip, I found it's best to focus on 2 things, the chest and the hands. Using the strength of your chest, squeeze your arms together towards each other like you would when doing some kind of pec deck or fly, and actively pull your hands into the sandbag, like you're doing some kind of isometric bent arm neutral grip row. This engages the back. The upper arms will still take much of the burden, but focusing on these things will help. The hands apart grip has 3 main uses in my experience. First is speed. If you need to move a heavy weight quickly, say with some kind of sandbag carry medley, or when going for max reps lifting a sandbag from your lap to your shoulder during a competition, this might be a good option simply because it takes less time to get into position. Put your hands on the sandbag and go. A quick word of caution though, unless there's a lot on the line, like maybe your livelihood depends on your performance, I'd personally always put injury prevention first when given the choice. If it were me and I was in a race of some kind, I'd probably still clasp my hands in some way if possible. As I said, this one does place more strain on the biceps, and I wouldn't want to risk it with ultra heavy weights if I could help it. Sometimes you can't help it though, which is the second use for this grip. If a sandbag is so wide you physically cannot get your arms around it, you'll have no choice but to use the hands apart grip. My recommendation here is to 1, again focus on the chest and arms, and 2, to make sure your scapula is completely protracted, shoulders reached as far forward as you can get them. Doing this brings the sandbag more in line with the center of your body, and the closer you can get it to your center, the less bicep strain you'll feel. Protracting your shoulders also lets you, in a sense, wrap your lats around the sandbag, which helps a lot with bracing and the feeling of stability. A protracted scapula does mean a much greater challenge for the upper back in a stretched position, so be warned when you first move up to a sandbag wide enough to require this, you might want to keep the volume low for a few sessions, or there's the chance of getting some kind of minor upper back strain. I do believe the protracted shoulder position is one of the great things about sandbag lifting. It strengthens the upper back in a way nothing else really does, and it will eventually be necessary, so you'll want to condition yourself to it as soon as you can. Just know you may want to start slow. This applies to all grip techniques, by the way. Once you're used to it, I highly recommend always keeping your shoulders as far forward as you can get them when lifting a sandbag. The final use for this hands-apart grip technique is very situational, and I would only consider using it on occasion, but if you're doing something that has you pushing for a very long time, say one long rest pause set of box squats or the lift from the lap to the chest, or if you're doing something like heavy bear hug carries every minute on the minute for 20 plus minutes, this grip can act as a kind of brake for the upper back. If you've been pushing the volume for a long time, reaching your arms as far around the sandbag as you can get them, the upper back will become fatigued. If you strategically throw in this hands apart grip and actually keep your shoulders in more of a neutral position rather than reached forward, you'll force the arms to take more of the burden, giving the upper back a break. It can also give the hands themselves a break too if you've been using a more advanced grip. When going for a high rep set of box squats, I might use this strategy on reps, say 50 to 60, then move back to something else after my back has had time to recover a bit. If I'm doing a challenge workout, something like carrying a sandbag around the yard 50 times, I might use this for 1 or 2 laps every 10 laps or so. I wouldn't overdo it, but used sparingly, this strategy can make a big difference. Something else to consider, if you have very long arms, or if your sandbag is so skinny that you can actually reach your hands past each other, in my opinion, the best option would be to take advantage of that opportunity and use a more secure grip, rather than keeping your hands apart. Just something to think about. One final note, if your arms are way behind everything else, and for whatever reason they just won't seem to catch up, you might consider using the hands apart grip as a way to target them directly. As a finisher to a workout, take a moderately heavy weight, get into that neutral shoulder, hands apart position I mentioned earlier, and go for a max distance bear hug carry. Using this strategy, your upper arms will be pushed to their limit, and they'll have no choice but to adapt. You might compare this to doing a farmer's carry without straps. If you wanted to move the most amount of weight possible and really challenge the big prime mover muscles, you would use straps, but for a great grip challenge, going without is a good accessory exercise. The same is true here, just for the upper arms. Next, we have the fingers interlocked grip. This is a passive grip, relying as much on friction as it does actual strength. While you must still actively squeeze a sandbag to keep hold of it, this grip lets you use the friction between the skin of your fingers to bypass some of the strength requirements. This makes it a great place to start for beginners. Bear hug squeezing strength is completely new territory for most people just starting out with odd object lifting, and the fingers interlocked grip lets you skip over some of that initially, letting you push the rest of your body further than you otherwise could. Your grip and bear hug squeezing strength will improve when using this technique, they just become less of the focal point. The main downside to this grip, aside from the fact that when overused it can cause skin tears, is that it relies on chalk, or at the very least on your hands being dry. With sweaty hands, all friction goes away and your fingers will simply come apart. This means it has less utility when going for longer sets. There are 2 main uses I see for this grip. First, as mentioned already, it's a great place to start if your bear hug strength is lagging. Using this grip when I first started lifting sandbags and stones let me handle much heavier weights than I otherwise could have, and allowed me to get the muscle and strength gains I wanted faster. When looked at in this way, this grip is almost like using lifting straps. There's nothing wrong with it, and it will still strengthen your grip, it just lowers the grip requirement needed to lift a sandbag. The second use is to conserve energy. Because this grip relies on friction as much as it does actual muscle engagement, it lets you save your strength for later. This has been very useful in the long sets of box squats I've been doing. I'll start a set with lots of chalk and a fingers interlocked grip and use it until my hands become sweaty and the chalk disappears, then I'll switch to something else. This can also be great for any kind of high volume work. If you're pushing your limits, it's nice having this grip there as something to fall back on. 30 minutes into a heavy carry session, for example, you might reach the point where it takes everything you have just to make yourself do another set. Knowing you can use the fingers interlocked grip to make things a bit easier for a while can give you the edge needed to complete the workout. Some final thoughts on this one. The fingers interlocked grip is a viable option, and I believe it can be used well into the elite stages of sandbag lifting without ever slowing you down. Up until recently, I used it for pretty much everything, but I've come to realize there is a lot of strength to be gained by moving on. If you switch from this passive grip to something that takes more active attention, you will likely feel very weak at first, but with practice, you'll find you become much stronger in a relatively short amount of time. Switching to more of an active grip has taken my bear hug strength to an entirely new level, and now even when I do use a fingers interlocked grip, I feel much more stable than I used to. I encourage anyone who has been using the fingers interlocked grip and nothing else to start working with an active grip too, if only for just 1 or 2 sets every workout to start. It will make you a much better sandbag lifter in the long run. That leads me to the final grip for today, the S grip. In my opinion, the S grip is the ultimate grip for sandbag lifting. It's accessible even with very wide sandbags, it's secure and works even when your hands are sweaty, it engages the most amount of muscle and makes bracing easier, it comes with something like a second cylinder because there are 2 different hand positions you can use, and if you like grappling, it should have direct carryover. Note, before using this grip, I recommend trimming your fingernails. To use the S grip, first straighten out your fingers and thumbs like you would when preparing for some kind of karate chop, then curl your fingers, making your hands into claws. Once there, turn your hands so one palm is facing directly away from your body and the other is facing directly towards your body. From there, simply clasp your fingers together and you're good to go. Another note, keep your thumbs pressed tightly against your hands at all times. Do not allow them to wander. This reminds me of an old running coach I had. He used to call us out for hitchhiking if we raised our thumbs. It's really not a big deal when lifting sandbags, but if you're going to use a grappling grip, you might as well do it right, and exposing your thumbs would leave you vulnerable in a fight. First, it's accessible. If you can reach your arms around a sandbag far enough to use a fingers interlocked grip, you can use the S grip. This is not true of other, possibly stronger grappling grips like the gable grip, which lessens the space you have available between your arms. Every bit of space counts when trying to keep hold of a bulky sandbag. Even if you could use the gable grip, by the way, and this could just be personal preference, I still like the S grip more. It just feels more natural with a wide sandbag, to me at least. Moving on, it's secure and involves the most amount of muscle. The S grip is by far the most stable of the 3 grips discussed today. It takes more work to use it. You'll have to actively work at keeping your hands in position at all times, but doing so means your grip becomes much more secure. With this grip, while you still want to think about squeezing with your chest, you also want to focus on pulling your hands apart from each other. Doing so really gets the lats involved. Comparing the 3, there's simply no contest. This grip is the strongest. It has a second cylinder. Because your hands are in opposite positions with the S grip, one hand palm facing out, the other palm facing in, when you start to fatigue, you can switch positions, moving the outside hand to the inside and vice versa. This has been very useful for those high rep sets of box squats I keep mentioning. When using this grip, I usually switch positions every 5 reps or so, and since doing that, my grip has never once held me back. Again, this can be applied to high volume workouts as well. Alternating back and forth every set gives you more strength to work with. I'm not sure how much this actually impacts things, but when doing that challenge workout I mentioned before, going for 50 laps around the yard, I often think of each direction as having its own power source. Like, if I start the set walking to the right, that means I'll be turning left the entire set. If I start walking left, I'll be turning right. And I imagine each direction works the body in a different way. Thinking of these things as different exercises seems to make it mentally easier to keep going for longer. Well, combined with the S grip, rather than 2 different exercises, you might say there are 4, walking left with both hand positions and walking right with both. I always find little tricks like these cool. Maybe this one will help you out. And finally, about grappling, this is a grip that's actually used for that, so practicing it here is a great way to directly improve strength with your sport. Where the other grips had situational uses, with this one, I highly recommend working towards using it as often as you can. As I said before, at first it will probably feel weak and it might feel awkward, but given time, you will come to love the security you get with it. If it's an option, I would use this grip every chance you get. You'll find that once you've mastered it, grip will likely never be an issue for you again, meaning you can focus more on overall performance, which means more work for the big prime mover muscles and more size and strength gains overall. And that's it. Hands apart, fingers interlocked, and the S grip. I believe these 3 will serve you well. If you like this video and want to know more about heavy sandbag lifting, consider checking out my book Sandbag Hypertrophy over on Amazon. It's a complete sandbag training manual, giving you everything you need to get started with the training style. If you're interested, I'll have a link to the book, as well as a link to a video I made going over the main program from the book in the description below. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.